At 72, Violet finally understood one simple truth. The scariest thing in life wasn't falling from 50 feet high. The scariest thing was when the applause stopped forever. And you were left alone with your memories. She sat on the steps of her small trailer in sunny Palms. This trailer park outside Tampa was far from the big top tents. Far from the smell of popcorn and loud circus music. Far from the life that once seemed like the only possibility. Arthritis reminded her every morning with sharp pain in her knee. The same knee that once endured hours of tightrope training. Now even walking to the mailbox became a real challenge. Violet rolled her shoulders, feeling the familiar pulling ache. 50 years of circus life hadn't passed without a trace. The phone in her robe pocket quietly rang. Violet looked at the screen and smiled. Jennifer, her daughter, called every day at 9 a.m. Punctual as a Swiss watch, nothing like her circus mother. "Hi, sweetheart," Violet answered, trying to hide the fatigue in her voice. "Mom, how are you? Did you remember to take your medicine?" "Everything's fine, dear. Just enjoying the Florida sunshine." Jennifer always worried. Violet understood this concern, but sometimes it seemed excessive. Her daughter thought Mom should move to a nursing home. A place with medical care and organized activities. Violet imagined group knitting sessions and mandatory scheduled walks. "Listen, Mom, I have news. Grace is coming to stay with you for summer vacation." Violet's heart jumped with joy. Her 9-year-old granddaughter was a ray of light in her gloomy world. The girl had the same determination that once drove Violet around the arena. "When?" asked Grandma, already planning to show her granddaughter all her circus costumes. "Tomorrow evening. Jim will drive her after work." After the call, Violet felt 20 years younger. Grace always listened to her circus stories with wide eyes. The girl didn't understand why her parents forbade her from doing gymnastics. Jennifer considered circus too dangerous a world for a child. Violet slowly got up from the steps and went inside the trailer. The small space was filled with memories. Photos from different circuses hung on the walls. Young Violet in sparkling costumes, with the confident smile of an acrobat. Nearby stood silver cups and diplomas for performances. In the corner of the room lay an old red suitcase. Violet opened it carefully, as if touching treasure. Inside lay circus costumes, decorated with sequins and rhinestones. Each costume told its own story. Blue with gold stars, for performing with horses. Pink with feathers, for acrobatic acts under the dome. She touched the blue costume with her fingers. She remembered her favorite horse Maestro. A giant bay stallion with intelligent brown eyes. Together they created real magic in the arena. Violet performed jumps from his back, and Maestro danced to music. The last time she saw Maestro was 5 years ago. The horse was sold to another circus after her retirement. Violet often thought about her old friend. She hoped his new owners treated him well. The doorbell rang. Violet closed the suitcase and went to answer. A young man in postal service uniform stood at the door. He held a large yellow envelope in his hands. "Mrs. Anderson. Urgent mail for you." Violet signed the receipt with fingers crooked from arthritis. The sender was unknown. Star Ring Circus Company from Orlando. She opened the envelope with curiosity. Inside was a letter on official letterhead. Violet put on her glasses and began reading. The first lines made her heart beat faster. The letter was about Maestro. Her old friend had been found in neglected condition at one of the provincial circuses. The 30-year-old horse suffered from chronic leg pain. The new owner couldn't afford expensive treatment. The veterinarian recommended euthanasia as the most humane option. The letter asked permission from his former partner for this procedure. Violet sank onto the couch, clutching the letter in her hands. Maestro wasn't just a horse. He was her friend, partner, part of her soul. They spent the best years of life together. Now he was somewhere far away, old and sick, waiting for his fate. Tears clouded her eyes. Violet remembered how Maestro always gently touched her shoulder with his nose after a performance, as if thanking her for a beautiful act. His eyes shone with intelligence and trust. Such trust between human and animal doesn't happen often. Outside she heard neighbors' voices. Life in the trailer park flowed in its usual rhythm. Retirees watered flowers by their little houses. Someone watched TV at full volume. An ordinary day at sunny Palms. But for Violet, this day became a turning point. She held in her hands the possibility of saving her old friend. Or the last chance to see her past. Arthritis reminded her with pain in her fingers. She was no longer a young acrobat capable of heroic deeds. Tomorrow Grace would arrive. A girl who dreamed of circus, not knowing any real circus performers. Except Grandma, whose best years remained in memories. Violet looked at the photo with Maestro on the wall. The sun was setting behind the trailer park palms. The Florida sky turned red and orange. Violet still held the letter about Maestro. The decision she had to make would change everything. In old age, people understand the value of last chances. Sometimes they come in the form of a letter in a yellow envelope. Sometimes in the form of a granddaughter who dreams of circus. And sometimes in the form of an old horse waiting for rescue. Violet knew, tomorrow her life would definitely change. Grace arrived the next evening like a small hurricane. Her blonde pigtails bounced as she ran up the trailer steps. Jim, her father, followed with a pink suitcase and apologetic smile. "Mom, please don't fill her head with circus nonsense," he whispered to Violet. "Jennifer is already worried about Grace's gymnastics obsession." Violet nodded but crossed her fingers behind her back. Some promises were made to be gently bent. Grace was 9 years old and deserved to know her grandmother's real story. After Jim left, Grace immediately spotted the circus photos on the walls. Her green eyes grew wide with wonder. She pointed at a picture of young Violet on horseback. "Grandma Violet, is that really you? You looked like a princess." "Better than a princess, sweetheart. I was a circus performer." Grace touched the frame with reverent fingers. In the photo, Violet wore her blue costume with gold stars. Maestro stood beneath her, magnificent and proud. The arena lights caught the sequins on her outfit. "Tell me everything. Did you really jump from horses? Were you scared?" Violet sat down carefully, her arthritic knees protesting. She patted the couch cushion beside her. Grace bounced over and snuggled close to her grandmother. "Fear was part of the magic," Violet began. "Without fear, there's no courage. And without courage, there's no real performance." She told Grace about her first time on horseback. How terrified she was at 16 years old. The ground seemed so far away from Maestro's back. But the horse sensed her fear and moved extra gently. "Maestro was my best friend for 25 years. We understood each other without words." Grace listened with the intensity only children possess. Her small hand rested on Violet's arm. The evening Florida heat made the trailer warm and cozy. "Where is Maestro now? Can we visit him?" Violet's heart clenched. She looked at the yellow envelope on the coffee table. The letter that had changed everything yesterday. Grace followed her gaze with curious eyes. "Maestro is very old now, honey. Older than me in horse years. Is he sick?" Children always ask the most direct questions. Violet had learned not to lie to Grace. The girl was too smart and deserved honest answers. "Yes, sweetheart. He's very sick and far away." Grace's face crumpled with immediate sympathy. At 9, she already loved animals fiercely. Her room at home was filled with stuffed horses and dog figurines. "Can't we help him? You helped me when I broke my arm." The comparison hit Violet unexpectedly. Last year Grace had fallen from her bike. Violet drove to the hospital and stayed all night. She held Grace's hand during the X-rays and bought ice cream afterward. "It's complicated, honey. Maestro lives in Orlando now. That's 3 hours away by car. So we can drive there. Daddy drives to Orlando for work sometimes." Grace's solution was beautifully simple. In her 9-year-old world, problems had straightforward answers. Love meant action. Distance was just miles to travel. Violet opened the yellow envelope and showed Grace the official letter. The girl couldn't read all the medical terms, but she understood the important parts clearly enough. They want to put him to sleep forever. Like when Mittens got old. Mittens had been Grace's cat. The family made the difficult decision last Christmas. Grace cried for days but eventually understood it was kindness. The people taking care of Maestro think it would be merciful. But you don't think so? Violet looked into her granddaughter's earnest green eyes. In them she saw her own stubborn determination. The same fire that once drove her across tightropes. "I think Maestro deserves a chance to live his final years peacefully. In a place where people understand what he gave the world. Then we have to save him." Grace jumped up from the couch with newfound purpose. She began pacing the small trailer living room. Her mind was already working on solutions. "We need a plan, Grandma. Do you have money for gas? Can your car make it to Orlando?" Violet's old Honda Civic sat outside under a palm tree. It was 15 years old but reliable. She had enough savings for gas and emergency expenses. The real obstacles were more complicated. "Grace, honey, I'm 72 years old. I can barely walk to the mailbox some days. But you're still strong. You taught me how to do handstands last summer." That was true. Despite the arthritis, Violet had shown Grace basic gymnastics moves. The girl learned quickly, with natural balance and fearlessness. Taking care of a sick horse requires more than handstands. "We'll figure it out together. I can help feed him and brush his coat." Grace's enthusiasm was infectious but also heartbreaking. She didn't understand the realities of horse care. Maestro would need expensive medication and special facilities. Violet's trailer park didn't allow large animals. The evening grew darker outside the windows. Neighbors turned on their porch lights one by one. Violet could hear the distant sound of televisions and air conditioners. "Sweetheart, even if we could rescue Maestro, where would we keep him?" This stumped Grace temporarily. She looked around the tiny trailer with new eyes. Obviously, a horse couldn't live in sunny Palms. The homeowners association barely tolerated cats. There must be places for old horses. Like retirement homes for people. Children's logic often cut straight to the heart of things. Horse sanctuaries did exist for retired circus animals. Violet had heard about them but never investigated seriously. She walked to her laptop computer, moving slowly on stiff legs. Grace bounced beside her with excitement. They searched together for horse rescue organizations in Florida. The first website showed green pastures and happy horses. Testimonials from grateful owners covered the page. But the costs made Violet's heart sink immediately. $500 per month for basic care, she read aloud. Grace did quick math in her head. That's $6,000 a year. Do you have that much money? Violet's social security and small pension barely covered her own expenses. Trailer rent, groceries, and medication took most of her income. $6,000 might as well be $60,000. I'm afraid not, honey. But Grace wasn't ready to give up so easily. She clicked through more websites with determined concentration. Her small fingers flew over the keyboard surprisingly fast. Look at this one. They take donations to sponsor horses. Maybe people would help Maestro if they knew his story. The idea sparked something in Violet's chest. A feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Hope mixed with the old performing instinct. Maestro's story was extraordinary enough to touch people's hearts. You might be onto something, sweetheart. They spent the next hour exploring crowdfunding websites. Grace read success stories aloud with growing excitement. A dog needed surgery, a cat required expensive treatment. Regular people donated small amounts that added up to miracles. We could make a video of you telling Maestro's story. Show pictures from when you performed together. The plan was taking shape despite all logical obstacles. Violet felt the familiar stirring of pre-performance nerves. The same feeling before stepping into the spotlight. Outside, sunny Palm settled into its quiet evening rhythm. But inside the small trailer, 2 generations planned their first rescue mission. The circus spirit was about to awaken from its long sleep. Grace fell asleep on the couch around 10 p.m. Violet covered her with a soft blanket and watched her peaceful face. Tomorrow they would call the Orlando Circus office. Tonight, for the first time in years, Violet felt truly alive. The yellow letter lay forgotten on the coffee table. Its deadline suddenly seemed less important than the possibilities ahead. The phone call to Orlando didn't go as planned. Dr. Martinez, the circus veterinarian, sounded tired and rushed. In the background, Violet heard animal sounds and shouting voices. Mrs. Anderson, I'm glad you called. But I have to be honest with you. Maestro's condition has worsened since we sent that letter. Grace pressed her ear close to the phone, listening intently. Her small face grew pale as the doctor explained the situation. His arthritis has spread to both front legs now. He can barely stand for more than 10 minutes. The owner wants to schedule the procedure for this Friday. 3 days. They had 3 days to save Maestro or lose him forever. Violet's hands shook slightly as she gripped the phone. Doctor, what if someone wanted to take him? For palliative care. A long pause. Ma'am, with respect, Maestro weighs 1,200 pounds. He needs specialized transportation and round-the-clock medical supervision. Are you prepared for that responsibility? Violet looked at Grace's determined face. The girl nodded vigorously, as if she could will their grandmother to say yes. We'd like to visit him first. Today, if possible. I suppose that would be acceptable. But please understand, this isn't the horse you remember. Age has been very hard on him. After hanging up, Grace immediately ran to pack snacks for the road trip. Her energy contrasted sharply with Violet's growing anxiety. 3 hours to Orlando in heavy traffic. Her arthritis flaring up from stress. And at the end, facing Maestro in his current condition. The Honda Civic started reluctantly in the midday Florida heat. Violet adjusted the rearview mirror and saw Grace bouncing in the back seat. The girl had brought her stuffed horse and a bag of carrots. Grandma, do you think Maestro will remember you? I hope so, sweetheart. Horses have excellent memories. The drive through Central Florida's endless strip malls and orange groves gave Violet time to think. What exactly was she planning to do? Even if they could somehow rescue Maestro, she had no facilities for a sick horse. Grace chattered excitedly for the first hour, planning their crowdfunding campaign. She wanted to make videos and post pictures on social media. In her 9-year-old mind, the internet could solve any problem. We'll tell everyone about your circus days. People love stories about friendship between humans and animals. Violet smiled despite her worries. Grace's optimism was infectious, even when it clashed with harsh reality. The second hour passed more quietly. Grace dozed in the back seat, exhausted from excitement. Violet drove through the familiar Florida landscape, remembering countless trips between circus venues. Back then, she traveled with caravans of performers and animals. Now she was just an old woman in a 15-year-old car, chasing ghosts from her past. The Orlando Circus facility sat on 10 acres outside the city. Rusted trailers and makeshift animal enclosures dotted the property. It wasn't the glamorous big top Violet remembered from her performing days. Dr. Martinez met them at the gate. He was younger than expected, probably in his 30s. His tired eyes suggested he'd seen too many difficult cases recently. "Mrs. Anderson, I have to warn you again. Maestro is not in good shape." They walked past cages holding aging lions and worn-looking elephants. The whole place smelled of hay and animal waste. Grace stayed close to Violet, suddenly less excited. "Is this where circus animals come to retire?" Grace whispered. "Some of them," Violet replied sadly. It was nothing like the peaceful sanctuary they'd imagined. Maestro stood in a small paddock behind the main building. Violet's heart broke at the sight of her old friend. The magnificent bay stallion she remembered had become a thin, gray shadow. His once proud head hung low with pain. Each step looked like an enormous effort. When he saw them approaching, he lifted his head slightly but didn't move closer. "Oh, Maestro," Violet whispered, tears filling her eyes. Grace slipped her small hand into her grandmother's. Even at 9, she could see the horse was suffering badly. Dr. Martinez opened the gate carefully. "He's very gentle still. But his mobility is severely limited." Violet approached slowly, speaking in the soft voice she'd used during their performing days. "Hello, old friend. It's me. It's Violet." Maestro's ears perked up at the familiar sound. He took one painful step forward, then another. Recognition dawned in his dark eyes as he caught her scent. "He remembers you," Grace breathed in amazement. The horse lowered his great head until it rested against Violet's shoulder. She felt his warm breath on her neck, just like after their circus performances. Her tears flowed freely now. "I'm so sorry, boy. I should have found you sooner." Maestro's gentle brown eyes looked into hers with the same trust she remembered. Despite his pain, despite the years apart, their bond remained unbroken. Grace approached carefully with her bag of carrots. "Can I give him one?" Maestro accepted the carrot with delicate lips. For a moment, his eyes brightened with simple pleasure. Grace stroked his neck with reverent touches. "Grandma, we have to save him. We just have to." Dr. Martinez cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mrs. Anderson, I need to be direct with you. Even if you could take him, Maestro needs daily pain medication costing $40. Plus special feed, farrier care, and potential emergency treatments." The numbers were overwhelming. $40 a day meant $1,200 a month just for medicine. Add food, veterinary care, and facility costs, and the total became impossible. "How long do you think he has?" Violet asked quietly. "With aggressive treatment, maybe 6 months to a year. Without it?" The doctor shrugged sadly. Grace pulled at Violet's sleeve urgently. "We can't let them put him to sleep. Look how happy he is to see you." It was true. Despite his pain, Maestro seemed more alert than when they'd arrived. He kept his head near Violet's shoulder, soaking up her familiar presence. "Doctor, if someone could provide the proper care, would you release him? If they could demonstrate adequate facilities and veterinary support, yes. But ma'am, I've been doing this for 12 years. The reality is that most older horses..." He didn't finish the sentence, but they all understood. Most older horses were put down when they became too expensive to maintain. Violet made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. "We'll take him." "Grandma!" Grace shouted with joy. "Mrs. Anderson, with all due respect, you can't just..." Dr. Martinez started. "I have a plan," Violet said firmly, though she absolutely didn't. "Give me until Friday to arrange proper facilities." The drive home passed in tense silence. Grace sensed the enormous challenge they'd undertaken. Violet's mind raced through possibilities, each more impossible than the last. "Grandma, how are we really going to do this?" "I don't know yet, sweetheart. But I gave Maestro my word." Back at Sunny Palms that evening, they sat at the laptop again. This time, Violet searched with desperate urgency. Horse sanctuaries, rescue organizations, crowdfunding sites, anything that might offer hope. Grace fell asleep on the couch again, emotionally exhausted. Violet covered her with the same blanket and continued searching long into the night. At 3 a.m., she found something that might work. A horse sanctuary in Ocala that specialized in retired circus animals. They offered sponsorship programs where donors could support specific horses for monthly fees. The director's email was listed on the website. Violet began typing, her arthritic fingers moving slowly over the keys. "Dear Ms. Patterson, my name is Violet Anderson. I am a retired circus performer, and I desperately need your help." She wrote about Maestro, their partnership, and his current situation. She described Grace's determination and their impossible deadline. By dawn, she had crafted a heartfelt plea that told their entire story. The send button seemed enormous on the screen. This email might be Maestro's only chance for a dignified end to his life. Violet closed her eyes and clicked send. Outside, the Florida sun began to rise over Sunny Palms. Friday was only 2 days away. Grace slept peacefully on the couch, dreaming of rescued horses and circus magic. Violet stayed awake, praying that somewhere in Ocala, a stranger might read their story and choose to help. The email response came at 7 a.m. Thursday morning. Violet's phone buzzed with the notification while Grace still slept on the couch. With trembling fingers, she opened the message from Sarah Patterson. "Dear Mrs. Anderson, your story moved me deeply. I've been working with retired circus animals for 15 years. Maestro sounds like a horse who deserves dignity in his final chapter." Violet's heart leaped with hope. She continued reading eagerly. "However, I must be honest about our current situation. We have a waiting list of 12 horses needing placement. Our medical facility is at capacity until next month." The hope deflated like a punctured balloon. Violet sank into her kitchen chair, feeling every one of her 72 years. Next month would be too late for Maestro. That said, the email continued, "I have a proposal that might work." Grace stirred on the couch, waking to find her grandmother hunched over the laptop. "What's wrong, Grandma? Did someone write back?" Violet gestured for Grace to come read over her shoulder. Together they absorbed Sarah Patterson's unexpected offer. "We have a retired veterinarian volunteer named Dr. Frank Coleman. He recently lost his own horse and has been looking for a special case to sponsor. If you could arrange temporary housing for Maestro, Dr. Coleman would provide medical care at no cost." Grace grabbed Violet's arm excitedly. "That's amazing. Where can we keep him temporarily?" The practical question brought them back to reality. Sunny Palms definitely didn't allow horses. Most boarding facilities charged hundreds per month. And Maestro needed more than just a stall. Keep reading, sweetheart. There's also Martha Hendricks, the email went on. She owns a small farm 20 minutes from you in Brooksville. Martha retired from horse training last year but kept her facilities. She might consider a short-term arrangement for the right horse. Violet wrote down Martha's phone number with shaking hands. This could actually work. It wouldn't be permanent, but it might give Maestro a peaceful final chapter. Grace was already planning again. We should call her right now. And the veterinarian too. It's still early, honey. Let's wait until 8 o'clock. They spent the next hour researching Martha Hendricks online. Her website showed a modest farm with clean stables and small pastures. The photos revealed an older woman with kind eyes and gentle hands. At exactly 8 a.m., Violet dialed Martha's number. Grace pressed close to listen to the conversation. Mrs. Hendricks. My name is Violet Anderson. Sarah Patterson from Gentle Giant Sanctuary gave me your number. Martha's voice was warm but cautious. Oh yes, Sarah mentioned you might call. Something about a circus horse. Violet explained Maestro's situation, her own background, and their desperate timeline. Martha listened without interrupting, asking occasional questions about the horse's temperament and medical needs. 30 years old, you said. And severe arthritis in multiple legs? Yes, ma'am. I know it sounds like a burden, but he's the gentlest soul you've ever met. A long pause. Mrs. Anderson, I lost my own horse 6 months ago. Cancer took him at 28 years old. Since then, the barn has been too quiet. Grace's eyes grew wide with hope. She crossed her fingers on both hands. I'd be willing to provide temporary boarding for 3 months. That would give us time to see how he responds to proper care. Violet's relief was so strong she nearly dropped the phone. Mrs. Hendricks, I can't thank you enough. How much would you charge for boarding? For a horse Maestro's age, with his story? I wouldn't charge anything. My husband left me comfortable when he passed. This would be my way of honoring both our horses. Grace actually cheered out loud. Violet shushed her quickly, but Martha chuckled on the other end. I take it that was your granddaughter. Sarah mentioned her in the email. Yes, Grace has been my partner in this rescue mission. Bring her along when you come to see the farm. Children and horses understand each other naturally. They arranged to visit Thursday afternoon. After hanging up, Grace danced around the small trailer living room. For the first time since Monday, their impossible plan seemed achievable. The call to Dr. Coleman went equally well. The retired veterinarian sounded genuinely excited about Maestro's case. He specialized in equine arthritis and had new treatment ideas to try. Pain management has advanced significantly in recent years, he explained. We might be able to improve his quality of life substantially. By noon, they had a complete plan. Martha would provide boarding, Dr. Coleman would handle medical care, and Sarah Patterson offered guidance from Gentle Giant Sanctuary. All that remained was convincing the Orlando Circus to release Maestro. Dr. Martinez sounded skeptical when Violet called with their proposal. Mrs. Anderson, you've arranged all this in 24 hours. Sometimes when you're desperate, things fall into place. I'll need to verify these arrangements with the owners. And we'll need proper transportation for a horse in Maestro's condition. Martha had already thought of that detail. Her neighbor owned a horse trailer designed for elderly animals. Comfortable padding and low loading ramps made transport less stressful. Thursday afternoon, they drove to Martha's farm in Brooksville. The property was exactly as Violet had imagined from the website photos. Clean white fences surrounded green pastures. The barn looked well maintained and peaceful. Martha met them at the gate. She was probably 65, with silver hair and laugh lines around her eyes. Grace took to her immediately. "Mrs. Hendricks, your farm is beautiful. Maestro will love it here. Call me Martha, honey. And thank you. My husband built these fences 40 years ago." They toured the barn facilities together. Martha had prepared a large stall with extra bedding for arthritic joints. The attached paddock offered easy access to shelter and exercise. "The morning sun hits this area perfectly," Martha explained. "Older horses appreciate warmth for their joints." Dr. Coleman arrived while they were still touring. He was a distinguished-looking man in his 70s, with gentle hands and a quiet voice. Grace watched as he examined the stall setup with professional eyes. "This is ideal for a horse with mobility issues," he pronounced. "Martha, you've thought of everything." Standing in the peaceful barn, surrounded by these generous strangers, Violet felt overwhelmed by gratitude. 2 days ago, she'd been alone with an impossible problem. Now a whole team of people was ready to help Maestro. "I still can't believe this is really happening," she whispered to Grace. "I can," Grace replied confidently. "Good things happen when you don't give up." The wisdom of 9-year-olds sometimes cut straight to the heart. Violet had given up on many things over the past few years. Her health, her relevance, her ability to make a difference. But Grace's determination had rekindled something important. That evening, Dr. Martinez called with final approval. The circus owners were relieved to transfer responsibility to people who clearly cared about Maestro's welfare. Transportation was scheduled for Friday morning. "One last thing, Mrs. Anderson," the veterinarian said. "The owners asked me to tell you something. They said Maestro always seemed to be waiting for someone. Maybe he was waiting for you." Grace was already asleep when Violet hung up the phone. Tomorrow would bring the culmination of their week-long rescue mission. Success seemed within reach, but Violet knew the real work would just be beginning. Caring for an elderly, sick horse required daily commitment. Veterinary expenses, even with Dr. Coleman's help, would strain her budget. And there was no guarantee how much time Maestro had left. But as she looked at Grace's peaceful sleeping face, Violet realized the rescue had already accomplished something important. They had proven that age doesn't eliminate the capacity for heroism. That love can motivate extraordinary efforts. That sometimes the most important victories happen quietly, in small barns, between old friends. Outside sunny palms, the Florida night settled into its familiar rhythm. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and uncertainties. Tonight, for the first time in years, Violet fell asleep feeling truly proud of herself. Friday morning arrived with perfect Florida weather. Clear skies and gentle breeze made it an ideal day for Maestro's journey to his new home. Violet woke early, her arthritic joints surprisingly cooperative for once. Grace had barely slept from excitement. She bounced around the trailer, packing snacks and checking her phone for updates from Martha. At 7 a.m., they drove to Orlando for the final time. The circus facility looked different in morning light. Less depressing somehow, more like a way station than a final destination. Dr. Martinez met them with paperwork and a relieved smile. "Maestro seems to sense something good is happening," he reported. "He's more alert today than I've seen him in weeks." The horse trailer arrived exactly on schedule. Pete, Martha's neighbor, was a weathered man in his 60s who clearly knew his business. The trailer was spacious and well padded, designed specifically for transporting elderly horses. "Don't you worry about a thing," Pete assured them. "I've moved hundreds of horses over the years. Maestro will ride in comfort." Loading proved easier than expected. Maestro seemed eager to leave his cramped paddock. With gentle encouragement, he walked slowly up the trailer ramp. His movements were careful but determined. Grace watched through the trailer's side window as they drove. "He looks peaceful, Grandma. Like he knows he's going somewhere better." The drive to Brooksville took 90 minutes. Violet followed the trailer in her Honda, marveling at how quickly their lives had changed. 1 week ago, she was just another lonely retiree in sunny Palms. Martha waited at her farm gate with Dr. Coleman in obvious anticipation. She'd spent the morning preparing fresh bedding and filling water buckets. Her excitement was almost as evident as Grace's. Unloading Maestro took patience and care. The horse emerged slowly, testing each step on his painful legs. But when he lifted his head and breathed the clean country air, something remarkable happened. His ears pricked forward with interest. For the first time since Orlando, he looked truly curious about his surroundings. The open pastures and peaceful barn seemed to awaken something dormant in his spirit. "Would you like to walk him to his stall?" Martha asked Violet. Leading Maestro across the farmyard felt like completing a circle. Violet remembered countless times walking him after performances, cooling him down and checking for injuries. Her hands still knew exactly how to hold his lead rope. The prepared stall exceeded all expectations. Deep bedding cushioned arthritic joints, automatic water systems ensured constant hydration, and rubber mats provided secure footing. Martha had even hung a radio playing soft classical music. "Horses find music calming," she explained to Grace. "Especially older ones who perform to musical cues." Dr. Coleman began his examination immediately. Maestro stood patiently as the veterinarian checked his legs, heart, and general condition. His professional assessment was cautiously optimistic. "The arthritis is extensive but manageable. With proper medication and gentle exercise, we should see improvement within 2 weeks." Grace helped fill Maestro's feed bucket with special senior horse pellets. The grain was supplemented with joint medications and anti-inflammatory herbs. Everything designed to ease his pain and improve mobility. "Can we visit him every day?" Grace asked Martha hopefully. "I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Horses thrive on routine and familiar faces." That afternoon, they established a visiting schedule. Grace would come after school when possible, weekends definitely. Violet would drive over whenever her arthritis allowed. Martha promised daily updates and photos. The first week exceeded everyone's expectations. Dr. Coleman's medication protocol worked better than hoped. Maestro's pain levels decreased noticeably, and his appetite returned with enthusiasm. Most importantly, his eyes regained the intelligent spark Violet remembered. Grace documented everything with her phone camera. Photos of Maestro eating, walking, even lying down comfortably in his stall. She created a simple website to share his progress with the growing circle of supporters. "Look, Grandma. 37 people have donated to his care fund." The crowdfunding campaign had taken on a life of its own. Grace's innocent enthusiasm attracted donors from around the world. Small amounts mostly, but they added up to meaningful support. More valuable than money was the outpouring of stories. Retired circus performers shared memories of their own horse partners. Animal lovers contributed photos of rescued horses. Veterans wrote about therapy horses that helped heal emotional wounds. "Maestro's story is touching people everywhere," Sarah Patterson explained during a phone call. "You've created something beautiful here." 2 weeks after the rescue, Violet sat in Martha's pasture watching Maestro graze peacefully. His movements were still careful, but the constant pain had clearly diminished. Grace sat beside her grandmother, sketching the horse in a small notebook. "You know what I learned from all this?" Grace said without looking up from her drawing. "What's that, sweetheart?" "Old doesn't mean useless. Maestro still has good days left. And so do you." Children's wisdom often arrived without warning. Violet felt tears prick her eyes as the simple truth settled into her heart. She had spent too many years defining herself by what she could no longer do. "I think Maestro taught us both something important," Violet replied. "It's never too late for a second chance." That evening, Martha invited them for dinner at the farmhouse. The kitchen was warm and filled with the smells of home cooking. Grace helped set the table while the adults shared stories about their horses. "You know," Martha said over dessert, "I've been thinking about our arrangement." Violet's heart sank. Had the 3-month trial period become too burdensome? Was Martha reconsidering her generous offer? "I'd like to make Maestro's stay permanent, if you're agreeable." The relief was overwhelming. "Martha, we couldn't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering. That horse has brought life back to this farm. And your visits have brought joy back to my days." Dr. Coleman nodded approvingly. "Maestro's progress has been remarkable. Consistency in his care environment will only help." Grace clapped her hands with delight. "He'll never have to move again. This is his forever home." The phrase, "forever home," carried special weight. Maestro would spend his remaining years in comfort, surrounded by people who understood his value. Not as a performing asset, but as a living being deserving dignity and love. That night, Violet tucked Grace into the trailer's small guest bed. The girl was exhausted but happy, clutching her stuffed horse and planning tomorrow's visit to the farm. "Grandma, when I grow up, I want to rescue horses too." "I think you'd be excellent at it, sweetheart. Will you teach me everything you know about horses?" "Everything I can remember," Violet promised. Sitting on her trailer steps under the Florida stars, Violet reflected on the extraordinary week. A desperate phone call had transformed into a rescue mission that changed multiple lives. Not just Maestro's, but her own, Grace's, Martha's, and Dr. Coleman's. The circus had taught her many things over 50 years. How to fall safely, how to read an audience, how to push past fear. But it had never taught her the most important lesson, that love expressed through action creates ripples far beyond the original gesture. Grace's determination had sparked the rescue, but it took a community to complete it. Strangers had become friends, united by compassion for an aging horse. In saving Maestro, they had all discovered something valuable about themselves. Her phone buzzed with a text from Martha. A photo of Maestro lying comfortably in his stall, ears relaxed, eyes peaceful. The caption read, "Sweet dreams, old friend." Violet smiled and typed back, "Thank you for giving him a home. Thank you for giving us all a home." The circus had been her first life, full of spotlight and applause. Retirement had been a quiet interlude, marked by gradual acceptance of limitations. But this felt like the beginning of a third act, defined not by what she could no longer do, but by what love could still accomplish. Tomorrow Grace would return to her parents, carrying stories of their adventure. But she would visit regularly, learning about horses and absorbing lessons about compassion. The connection between 3 generations would continue growing stronger. Maestro would graze in his pasture, pain-free for the first time in years. Martha would find purpose in caring for him. Dr. Coleman would perfect his treatment protocols. Sarah Patterson would use their story to inspire other rescues. The trailer park settled into its evening quiet. Violet remained outside, reluctant to break the spell of contentment. The arthritis that had seemed so limiting a week ago felt manageable tonight. Pain, she realized, was less overwhelming when it served a greater purpose. Inside her pocket, her phone held dozens of messages from supporters around the world. People who had been touched by Maestro's story and wanted to help other animals in need. Grace's simple website had become a beacon for anyone who believed in second chances. At 72, Violet had learned the most important lesson of her life. Age might limit physical abilities, but it couldn't diminish the capacity for love, courage, and positive change. The circus had ended, but the real performance was just beginning. The Florida sky stretched endlessly overhead, filled with possibilities as infinite as the stars.